Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy MKS here. Finally back. I say finally. Only just recently made a video. Uh, Back here in part three of my dreams for the bricks. Um, anyway, I hope you enjoy it. And as ever, I'd love to read your comments. Yeah, I know I've made quite a few videos in short succession, but I really wanted to go through these ideas. Anyway, as ever, I'd love to read your comments, and I'll try and be concise or get to the point or whatever. But so here goes. So again, please don't hold back your feedback. So number 21, I would love for the bricks to learn about each other, learn about each other's history and culture, and also to have on their website. I'd love to promote the idea for the bricks to have on their website and YouTube and possibly social media content generally, or pages generally, information about their history, the history of the bricks itself, the history of each nation in the bricks, respectively, and that sort of thing, so they can learn about each other's history, but also um, about each other's countries and cultures and history and tradition and things like that, but also people to learn about the bricks generally around the world, as well as from the bricks themselves, also around the rest of the world. And yeah, it could have information like information about Brazil, when the first settlers came, or some information about the indigenous people of Brazil. I also hope to empower the indigenous people of Brazil on that note. Similar for obviously for Russia and the rest of the countries within the group, and discussing about each other's history and that sort of thing, and the history of the bricks, I'll say, and each other's cultures and histories and that kind of thing. And just to recap one or two ideas, I did say I dream for them to unite together and support each other and work together as one sort of voice and be like a cooperative. So they agree to disagree on certain things, but they always sort of try and work together towards their greater good for each other, for their own individual countries, and for the greater group, for the BRICS itself and the people they network with, perhaps, and those countries that are friendly towards them, and also preventing wars as much as they can, and doing whatever they can to empower each other, even where though they might disagree in some areas. Again, agree to disagree, and look at what they do have in common and what they do agree upon, and work on that, and that sort of thing. Number 22, I hope they'll look to the future and see what they can do to grow their economies. I mentioned about neurodiversity like dyslexia, ADHD, and that sort of thing. And I think, I often think, I'm sure Asian nations, I know they've been growing and competing with Western nations for a while, but and they've had miraculous levels of growth, even though I'm not an expert in knowing all about that. But they've had miraculous levels of growth, which people often talk about. Even people like me know that China and India have really grown their economies, um, and other Asian nations as well. And maybe they can learn from each other and see what they can improve even further. But I think if China or India got complacent and thought they know it all, for instance, or they can go to war with different countries, or they don't have to get on well with others, I think they might find that it could limit their growth, or even stop it completely, or certainly make it curtailed. Whereas I think if they work together, I'm a great believer, if you work together, you have a greater chance. Although I do like my own me time and I do like to work by myself, I still think I can learn a lot from the world. And I'm sure even as clever as they are and as intelligent as they are, the Chinese, Indians, and others, Russians and whatnot, could learn from each other and the rest of the world a lot of great stuff. I'm sure there are areas where China is weak, where India might be strong, where they could learn from, and vice versa, as well as the other members of the BRICS. And they can invest together, again, pool money and resources together, have more money to invest, um, buy things in bulk and things like that. Maybe I'm being a bit naive, but I think even though when I discussed the idea of the dyslexic billionaires or the neurodiverse billionaires network, um, my sister's fiance said that I can understand that idea when it's on a smaller level, like buying things in bulk and investing together, but he couldn't see it in terms of bigger level. But I think in terms of mergers and acquisitions, sorry, I'm sure that the more money you have, the better. So even if you do have a lot of money, like there's companies that are investing trillions into each other. So if you're competing with those, I'm sure having even more money and even more resources is even better. So I mean, a lot of countries have trillions in assets at least, if not actual money, but they still don't always get their way. So the more money you have, the more investment power you have, the more information you have and networks you have, I think, the better. But again, I'd love to hear what people think about that thought. Am I making any sense? Am I being naive, or am I making a case? I would love to know. Um, but yeah, I think that there are things that Asian nations as well as African nations could do even better. Like for instance, they could cooperate with each other and learn more from each other, share money and resources, and also information, ideas, knowledge, skills, talents, and things like that. Even a nation as successful as China might not all have all of those things. And again, similar with India and others. Um, so they can learn from each other and um, yeah, network together. They could prevent wars. I think that would help their economies even more. They could cooperate. They could tackle intercommunal violence. They could look at ways they can prevent terrorism, cut crime, bring different communities together. And I think that sort of thing, a united Asia, I think would make even more money. Similar with Africa, if it was united, and especially if they were united together, Asia and Africa, or former colonized countries, if they network together, and emerging market economies, I think they could do some amazing stuff. And also, as I mentioned about neurodiversity, I think people with dyslexia have different ideas than other people, and I think maybe Asian and African nations are missing out on potential opportunity to grow even further. But that's my opinion. I'd love to read again what other people think. And there are organisations like Made by Dyslexia, Dyslexia Advantage, and others. I won't go through the whole lot of them, but they're and similar with autism and ADHD and other conditions, which argue the positive sides of neurodiversity, which I'm sure they would agree with me. Asian and African nations could do even better if they harnessed the specific and special talents and skills of people with special needs or learning disabilities or neurodiverse conditions, even though they're weak in areas like academics. Because I suppose people are pretty much everyone's probably pretty much everyone's probably strong in some areas and weak in others. Even myself, even I have probably have some strengths somewhere. Um, self-deprecating humor there, but yeah, although I got to admit I don't have many skills or talents if I'm honest, but even I can like think outside the box and things like that. So I'm sure learning from different minds, different thoughts, and all that would be beneficial. But again, I'd love to hear what people think. Am I barking up the wrong tree or whatever? Sorry, there's a fly around as well. Can't fly. But yeah, so I know I said I love all living things, but anyway, moving on. On that note, number 23, I would love for them to have sympathy, compassion, empathy for each other, and that kind of thing. Sympathy, empathy, um, peace amongst each other, love for each other, compassion for each other, and that kind of thing. And yeah, to work together as much as possible to tackle poverty, to help their citizens to have a better quality of life, to look at how the investment banks can or the investment bank could pool money and resources together and like invest in entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship within the BRIC nations, how they can invite investors. I can't remember if I mentioned this in part 1 or 2, but they could have like conferences and summits and events where they could talk about how they can invite different hedge funds. They could have their own version of Davos, perhaps, in if not in all of the countries, maybe at least in 1 or 2 of them. Again, maybe in all of them. And again, I'd love to travel to Brazil. I'll say again, I think I may have mentioned that point, but yeah, I'd love to travel to Brazil, Russia. If I felt safe enough to do so. I know some parts can be quite racist of Russia. Some parts of Brazil might not be that safe, but I'm sure there are safe parts of Brazil and Russia and the rest of those countries. But I'd love to travel to Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and like share my ideas and talk about like how they could have these summits and events, including inviting neurodiverse people like the Dyslexic Advantage in America. Excuse me. So excuse me. The Dyslexic Advantage in America had like conferences or a conference where they invited so many prominent dyslexics who are in the strong in their field or successful in their chosen field. Like that could, in many cases, it was venture capitalists, business people, and all sorts of people like that. And I'd love for Asian and African nations generally to host such events. So I'd love to for the BRICS to invite them. And again, maybe the BRICS could have their own version of Davos. They could have their own version of COP26 or the the G20 or whatever, they could have their own versions of those sorts of things and look at ways they could have their own take on those things and invite the world's wealthiest people, billionaires, dyslexic billionaires even, especially perhaps, or neurodiverse billionaires or neurodiverse people or business people generally, or all possible investors, banks and all sorts. So I think that'd be a pretty neat idea. But again, I'd love to hear what other people think and read what other people think. Number 24, I think it'd be great if they learned about each other, as I say, and supported each other and like looked at ways all 5 nations could benefit individually and together as a group as well. Yeah, so hopefully none of them will be left behind or do each other over. They'll all have each other's backs and look after each other and hopefully prevent wars by working together. I hope, as a pacifist myself. So yeah, I think that'd be pretty cool. And yeah, so maybe they could celebrate each other's national days, learn about key days and dates and events in each other's history. I mean, and benefit their own countries again, and as I say, and each other, and look at ways they can benefit. Each nation could benefit, and also, yeah, listen to each other's points of view as well. So give each member a voice, and new members, and anyone they network with, and that kind of thing. Number 25, I hope that to promote republicanism, as I often do. I especially love republics. So I hope they'll benefit. I think the BRICS, I'm sure they're all republics. I don't think any of them are monarchies. But yeah, maybe different emerging republics can network together with them, hopefully. Sorry to any monarchists out there, I don't mean to offend anyone. But I mean, it is a bit of a dilemma because a few royals have learning disabilities, like Princess B.R.I.S. from the UK, of course, the royal family of Sweden, I think one from Norway as well. So it is a bit of a dilemma as someone who supports republics, but also supports dyslexics or neurodiverse people. That's a bit of a dilemma. But yeah, I hope that my support for republics won't put off like the Swedish royal family from investing in Sampdoria or Spezia or any Italian team, as I mentioned before, and of course Celtic. Also Norway, I think they're a monarchy, but I hope it won't put them off from investing in an Italian team like Napoli and of course Celtic as well. But yeah, so moving on, yeah, but I hope that republics will benefit as much as possible. And me personally, as I say, talking about my own dreams, I would love to promote republicanism generally, including within the BRICS, and how they can network with other republics. Maybe they could invite the world's republics to the BRICS and host events which link the BRICS with other republics. I'm pretty sure, yeah, Brazil's a republic, Russia, India, China, and South Africa as well. And basically, yeah, they're all republics. But yeah, so they could perhaps network with other republics around the world. Number 26, also with anti-imperialists and maybe people of color generally as well. But yeah, they could also work with countries that colonized generally, maybe have those sorts of networks, hopefully. Number 27, I hope that Italians and Celtic fans, apologies if I did mention that point again, but before, but yeah, if they invested in or bought from companies from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and of course South Africa in return for investment in Italian football and Celtic, respectively. I'd love for Italian fans and Celtic to buy from companies that invest in them, which hopefully will encourage more investment. And also perhaps if they had a list of, I have to mention this one for number 27 because to me that's like a rewarding number, if they had a list of the top companies and investors and that sort of thing that invested in the BRICS, generally that their allies and people who supported them and who support them, and like also perhaps they could have an awards ceremony and like rewards and awards and ceremonies and things like that, and acknowledgements for people who contribute to the BRICS, whether it's those people from the BRICS themselves, like what ideas they contribute or investments they have contributed, or those who have contributed to the investment bank. Maybe there could be people who donate to the investment bank or sponsor projects, and they could be acknowledged. Number 28, I hope they will turn many negative situations in the world into positives. Number 29, again, I hope they'll learn about neurodiversity and the positives and the strengths as well as the weaknesses. I think it's important to learn the weaknesses as well, so you know a dyslexic person is not being lazy if they can't read or write or remember your name, or there's lots of areas where maybe a dyslexic might be weak, even knowing directions or getting to places on time or remembering the time, being organising paperwork, reading through paperwork or things like that. A dyslexic person might struggle with any form of organisation in many cases, or many dyslexics might, but there are many strengths as well. So I think it's important to know both. So you know, the dyslexic person is not being lazy, but they can be strong in other areas, but weak in others. So again, I'd love to hear what my fellow neurodiverse people or others think about that, or people who know about dyslexia. Like they might say, "Oh yeah, I know about dyslexia," or people who with dyslexia I know who are successful or whatever. So even those who don't have neurodiverse conditions, generally as well. And number 30, as ever, I would love to hear your views about this guy rambling here, i.e. myself, or my channel, or these videos specifically. Again, I hope you won't be too harsh, and I better stop waffling. I am out. Peace and love.